She took the job nobody wanted at the cruel millionaire's house and lived the best days of her life. 6 rejection letters lay crumpled in her bag as she stood at his imposing gates. Everyone warned her about Alexander Stone's cruelty, but Isabella Chen had nothing left to lose, except her heart. Welcome back, my beloved listeners. I've missed sharing stories with you, and today, I have a tale that will make you believe in the power of seeing beyond the surface. Before we dive in, I'd love to know, have you ever taken a chance that everyone else was afraid to take? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you're new here, join our family by hitting subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. Now let's begin. Isabella Chen stared at her reflection in the coffee shop window, adjusting her only blazer, a thrift store find that hung slightly loose on her frame. The morning rush hour crowd bustled past, clutching their expensive lattes and designer bags, while she nursed her 4th refill of plain black coffee. Miss Chen, the hiring manager's voice was apologetic. I'm sorry, but we've decided to go with someone with more corporate experience. Another rejection, her 6th this week. Across the street, a sleek digital billboard flashed the latest headlines. Stone Enterprises CEO terminates entire senior staff. Below it, a photo of Alexander Stone, Seattle's most notorious millionaire, his steel gray eyes seeming to pierce through anyone who dared meet his gaze. Here's your check, hon. The elderly waitress May slid it across the table. And don't worry about the refills. You looked like you needed them. Isabella's cheeks burned with shame as she pulled out her phone calculator. After this coffee, she'd have exactly $143.27 left in her account. Not enough for next month's rent. Thanks, May. Her voice cracked. I might not be able to come by for a while. May's weathered face softened. Tough out there, isn't it? Say, you looking for work? I just heard through my nephew. He's a gardener up at Stone Manor. They're hiring. Personal assistant position. Isabella almost laughed. For Alexander Stone? The man who fired his entire executive team via text message? The one they call the Terminator in business circles. 6 assistants in 3 months, May nodded. Pays excellent though. Double the market rate. Because no one lasts more than 2 weeks, Isabella muttered, but something stirred in her chest. Desperation, maybe. Or destiny. Across town, in a modernist mansion overlooking Lake Washington, Alexander Stone stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching Seattle's skyline shimmer in the morning light. At 42, he'd built an empire from nothing, but today, his victory felt hollow. Sir, his head of security, James, appeared in the doorway. The new candidate is here for the PA position. Alexander didn't turn. Educational background? Top of her class at UW Business School. Been job hunting for 3 months. Previous experience? None relevant to the position. Now he did turn, one eyebrow raised. Then why is she here? She was the only applicant, sir. Alexander's laugh was cold. Of course. Send her in. Let's see how long this one lasts. Isabella's hands trembled as she followed James through the mansion's stark white corridors. Modern art worth millions adorned the walls, but there wasn't a single personal photo. No warmth. No life. The door to his office swung open, and there he was, Alexander Stone, more imposing in person than any photo could capture. 6'2", impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Not just gray, but almost silver, like frozen lakes in winter. Miss Chen. His voice was deep, cultured, and entirely unwelcoming. Tell me why you're wasting my time. Isabella felt something snap inside her. 3 months of rejections, of condescension, of barely making ends meet. It all crystallized into a moment of pure, reckless courage. Actually, Mr. Stone, she said, stepping forward, I think you're wasting mine. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. James, still by the door, actually gasped. Excuse me. Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. You've gone through 6 assistants in 3 months. That's not their failure. It's yours. You're not looking for an assistant. You're looking for a punching bag, someone to blame for whatever's made you so bitter you can't keep anyone around for more than 2 weeks. She took another step forward, her heart thundering. I'm here because I'm excellent at my job, I learn fast, and unlike everyone else in Seattle, I'm not afraid of you. So the real question is, why are you wasting both our time with this power play interview when we both know you have no other candidates? For 30 seconds, nobody breathed. Alexander Stone stared at her with those Winterlake eyes, his expression unreadable. Then slowly the corner of his mouth twitched. You start tomorrow. 6 a.m. sharp. He turned back to his windows. James will show you out. Isabella stood frozen, processing what just happened. Had she really just talked back to Seattle's most powerful CEO and gotten the job? Miss Chen. James gently touched her elbow. This way, please. As they walked back through the sterile corridors, Isabella caught her reflection in a chrome sculpture. She looked different somehow. Stronger, braver, like someone who could survive anything. Little did she know, she'd just taken the first step toward changing not just her life, but Alexander Stone's as well. The next morning arrived with a symphony of rain against Isabella's apartment windows. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying yesterday's confrontation on loop. Had she been brave or just foolish? At 5:45 a.m., she stood before Stone Manor's gates, her second-hand blazer already dampened by Seattle's persistent drizzle. James appeared silently beside her, umbrella in hand. Morning, Miss Chen. Follow me. There's something you should know before you start. The mansion's kitchen was unexpectedly warm, a contrast to yesterday's sterile corridors. An elderly woman with silver hair was arranging fresh pastries. Mrs. Sullivan, our housekeeper, James introduced. She's been with Mr. Stone for 20 years. Since his parents died, Mrs. Sullivan added softly, pushing a cup of coffee toward Isabella. Back when this house knew laughter. Before Isabella could process that revelation, James cleared his throat. Mr. Stone's schedule is in your tablet. First task. He needs the Morrison contract reviewed by 8 a.m. But Isabella checked her watch. That's less than 2 hours. Welcome to the job nobody wants, dear. Mrs. Sullivan smiled sadly. Isabella found Alexander in his home office, silhouetted against the dawn. He didn't turn when she entered. The Morrison contract is on your desk. I need a full review by 8 a.m. I know. Isabella settled at her designated workspace. Would you prefer a digital markup or printed annotations? Now he did turn, surprise flickering across his features. Both. For the next hour, they worked in tense silence. Isabella's pen flew across the pages, her business degree finally proving its worth. She could feel his eyes on her occasionally, watching, waiting for her to crack. At 7:55 a.m., she placed both versions on his desk. The digital copy is in your inbox. I've flagged 3 potential liability issues in Section 4, and there's an inconsistency in the profit-sharing clause that could cost us millions if left uncorrected. Alexander picked up her annotations, scanning them with those intense silver eyes. His jaw tightened. These are thorough. That's why you hired me, isn't it? No, he said quietly. I hired you because you weren't afraid. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something electric crackled in the air between them. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. The Morrison meeting is in 30 minutes downtown, he stated, already reaching for his coat. You're coming with me. The ride down to Seattle in his Bentley was silent, but charged with unspoken tension. Isabella used the time to study him surreptitiously. Despite his imposing presence, there were signs of exhaustion around his eyes, a slight slump to his shoulders when he thought no one was looking. The meeting was a battlefield. Morrison, a ruddy-faced man in his 60s, tried every trick to rattle Alexander. But with each challenge, Isabella was ready, pulling up relevant sections of the contract, providing data, anticipating needs before they were voiced. Your new assistant's quite impressive, Stone, Morrison commented during a break. How long until you chase this one away too? Alexander's hand tightened on his water glass. Miss Chen is perfectly capable of speaking for herself, Isabella interrupted smoothly. And I'm not going anywhere, Mr. Morrison. Now about that profit-sharing clause. The meeting ended with a signed contract and a grudging handshake. In the elevator down, Alexander was unusually quiet. You didn't have to defend me, he finally said. I wasn't defending you. I was defending myself. She met his gaze in the mirrored walls. I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, respect, and something else she couldn't quite name. Back at the mansion, Isabella was gathering her things when Alexander spoke again. The last assistant. Do you know why she left? Isabella paused. No. She found a photo. In my desk. He moved to the window, his usual position. My sister. She died 15 years ago. Cancer. The assistant made some comment about how I should move on already. She lasted exactly 12 minutes after that. Isabella's heart clenched. I lost my mother to cancer 3 years ago. He turned sharply, really looking at her for the first time. Is that why you took this job? Because you're not afraid of anything anymore. No, she said softly. I took it because I recognized something in you that everyone else missed. And what's that? Pain doesn't make you cruel, Mr. Stone. It makes you human. The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander stared at her, his carefully constructed walls wavering for just a moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. I'll be here. As Isabella left the mansion, the rain had stopped. A weak sun pushed through Seattle's clouds, casting long shadows across the manicured grounds. Mrs. Sullivan was in the kitchen doorway, a knowing smile on her face. You're still here, the older woman observed. Yes, Isabella replied. I think I am. That night, in her small apartment, Isabella looked at the photo on her nightstand. Her mother's smiling face frozen in happier times. What am I doing, Mom? She whispered. Why do I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something huge? But deep down she knew. In Alexander Stone's wounded eyes, she'd seen something nobody else had bothered to look for. Not a cruel millionaire, but a broken heart trying to protect itself the only way it knew how. And somehow, without meaning to, she'd already decided to help him remember how to feel again. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of contracts, meetings, and carefully maintained distances. Isabella excelled at her job, anticipating Alexander's needs with an efficiency that occasionally earned her those rare, fleeting almost smiles. But for every step forward, he seemed determined to take 2 steps back. One rainy Tuesday morning, Isabella arrived to find him more agitated than usual. Cancel everything, he ordered, pacing his office. The charity gala tonight, I'm not going. Isabella checked the calendar on her tablet. The Children's Cancer Research Foundation gala? But you're the main donor. I said cancel it. She noticed his hands, usually so steady, trembling slightly as he reached for his coffee. Then she remembered. Mrs. Sullivan had mentioned his sister. Had she died in October? Mr. Stone, she said softly. Running away won't help. He whirled on her, eyes flashing. You're overstepping, Miss Chen. Probably. She held her ground. Fire me if you want, but first look at this. She pulled up an article on her tablet. Children smiling in a cancer ward, their heads bald but their eyes bright. Your donation last year funded a new treatment wing. 3 of these kids are in remission now. Alexander's face went through a complex series of emotions before settling into his usual mask. The car leaves at 7. Wear something appropriate. That evening, Isabella stood before her closet, heart sinking. Nothing she owned was appropriate for a Millionaire's charity gala. Her phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Sullivan. Come early. I have something for you. In the housekeeper's quarters, Mrs. Sullivan unveiled a garment bag. It was his sister's, she explained, revealing a classic black evening gown. Charlotte was about your size. She'd want someone to wear it. Mrs. Sullivan, I couldn't possibly dash. That girl lit up every room she entered. The older woman continued, her eyes distant. After she died, Alexander. He just switched off. Until you came. He hasn't changed. Isabella protested weakly. Hasn't he? Mrs. Sullivan smiled knowingly. He actually listens when you speak. He started eating breakfast again. Small things, but with Alexander, they're earthquakes. The dress fit perfectly, its simple elegance making Isabella feel both beautiful and fraudulent. She was securing the clasp of her mother's simple pearl necklace when Alexander appeared in the hallway. He stopped dead, something raw and vulnerable flashing across his face before disappearing. You're wearing Charlotte's dress. Mrs. Sullivan offered. I can change dash. No, he said quickly. Then softer. No. It suits you. The gala was held at the Seattle Art Museum, its marble halls filled with Seattle's elite. Isabella felt out of place until she noticed Alexander was just as uncomfortable, his shoulders tense under his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Dance with me, she said impulsively when the orchestra began a slow waltz. I don't dance. Everyone's watching. It'll look strange if you don't. His jaw clenched, but he took her hand, leading her to the dance floor. His touch was light, professional, yet Isabella's skin tingled where his fingers met her waist. You're good at this, she observed. My mother insisted on lessons. His voice was distant. Charlotte used to stand on my feet while we practiced. Isabella's heart ached for the boy he must have been, for the man still carrying so much loss. "Tell me about her," she whispered. He missed a step, recovering smoothly. "Why?" "Because she deserves to be remembered. Because hiding her away in that desk drawer isn't helping either of you." The music swelled, and Alexander pulled her slightly closer, his mask cracking just enough to let her see the pain beneath. "She loved autumn," he said finally, his voice so low she had to lean in to hear. "She said the trees weren't dying. They were putting on a show before taking a long nap. Even at the end, she believed in beautiful things." Isabella felt tears threatening. "She sounds wonderful. She would have liked you." The words seemed to surprise him as much as her. The song ended and they separated, both slightly shaken. Alexander immediately retreated to the bar, while Isabella found herself cornered by a group of socialites. "So you're the new assistant?" One woman smiled coldly. "Don't get too comfortable, dear. He'll tire of you like all the others. Or break you," another added. "Did you know his last assistant had a nervous breakdown?" "Actually," Isabella's voice was steel-wrapped in silk, "I heard she left because she lacked basic human empathy. Now, if you'll excuse me." She headed for the terrace, needing air, only to find Alexander already there, staring at the Seattle skyline. "They're wrong about you," she said, moving to stand beside him. "Are they?" His laugh was bitter. "I've driven away everyone who's ever worked for me. It's only a matter of time before you leave too. Is that what you want?" He turned to her, his eyes intense. "What I want doesn't matter. It never has. It matters to me." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Alexander took a step toward her, then stopped, conflict written across his features. "Isabella." It was the first time he'd used her first name. "You should go." "Why?" "Because I'm not good for anyone. Because everything I touch turns to ash. Because Because you're afraid," she finished softly. His eyes met hers, and for a moment the mask disappeared completely, leaving him raw and exposed. "Terrified," he whispered. Before either could say more, James appeared at the door. "Sir, the foundation director is ready for your speech." Alexander's walls slammed back into place. He straightened his jacket, nodded curtly to Isabella, and strode back inside. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Isabella hung Charlotte's dress carefully in her closet. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for making me remember her smile instead of her absence." Isabella pressed the phone to her heart, knowing that tomorrow he'd probably pretend none of this had happened. But something had shifted tonight, like the first crack in a frozen lake. The question was, would that crack heal over, or would it finally let the spring in? Seattle's notorious autumn storms arrived with a vengeance the following week. Isabella arrived at Stone Manor just as the first lightning bolt split the sky. "Major storm warning," James informed her, helping her with her rain-soaked coat. "They're predicting power outages across the city." Alexander was already in crisis mode, barking orders into his phone. "I want all our emergency response teams ready. If hospitals lose power, our generators need to be there within the hour." Isabella jumped into action, coordinating with emergency services, tracking weather patterns, and managing the flood of calls from concerned stakeholders. By noon, the storm had intensified. Trees bent sideways in the howling wind, and the normally spectacular view of Lake Washington had disappeared behind sheets of rain. "The mayor's office is on line 1, Isabella called out. "They're asking about the shelter situation." Alexander grabbed the phone, his voice commanding but controlled. "Open all Stone Enterprise properties with backup generators." "Yes, all of them. And send buses. I want everyone off the streets before dark." Isabella looked at him with new eyes. This was a side of him she hadn't seen before. Not the cruel millionaire, but a leader taking responsibility for his city. Suddenly, the mansion's lights flickered and died. "Backup generator should kick in," James said, but nothing happened. Alexander's face tightened. The maintenance team was supposed to check it yesterday. "They couldn't," Isabella remembered. "You canceled the appointment for the Morrison meeting." Thunder crashed overhead, making the windows rattle. Alexander's phone buzzed with an emergency alert. "Roads are flooding," he read. "All vehicles advised to stay off streets until further notice." Isabella's heart sank. Her apartment was on the other side of the city. "You'll stay here," Alexander stated, not a question but a command. "There are guest rooms upstairs." "Sir," James interrupted, "Mrs. Sullivan is trapped at her sister's place." The staff quarters are empty. Fine. Miss Chen can use my sister's old room. It's the only one ready for guests. Isabella's protest died on her lips as another lightning bolt illuminated his face. Was that concern in his eyes? The next few hours were chaos. They worked by candlelight and battery-powered lanterns, coordinating emergency responses across the city. Isabella was impressed by how Alexander seemed to know every detail of his operation, every person who might need help. As night fell, the temperature in the mansion began to drop. The fireplace in the library still works, Alexander said, noticing Isabella's slight shiver. We can set up there. The library was everything the rest of the house wasn't warm, lived in, with well-worn leather chairs and books that showed signs of frequent reading. A photo on the mantel caught Isabella's eye. A teenage Alexander with a young girl on his shoulders, both laughing. Charlotte loved this room, he said quietly, following her gaze. She used to say books were magic because they let you live 1,000 lives. Isabella smiled. My mother said something similar. She read to me every night in the hospital, even when she was the one in the bed. Alexander's hands stilled on the firewood he was arranging. How did you do it? After she died. One day at a time, Isabella answered honestly. And I tried to live in a way that would make her proud. Charlotte made me promise to be happy, he admitted, his voice rough. I've failed her every day since. No. Isabella moved closer, drawn by the raw pain in his voice. You've built an empire that helps people. Tonight, you're sheltering hundreds from the storm. That would make her proud. He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing something new. The firelight cast shadows across his face, softening his usual sharp edges. Why aren't you afraid of me? He whispered. Everyone else. Because I see you, she said simply. The real you, not the mask you wear. The electricity crackled between them, more powerful than the lightning outside. Alexander took a step toward her, then another. A loud crash from outside made them both jump. James appeared at the door. A tree's down in the driveway, sir. No damage to the house, but we're completely blocked in now. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, the moment broken. Get some rest, James. We'll deal with it in the morning. Hours later, Isabella lay awake in Charlotte's room, surrounded by the lingering essence of a girl she'd never met, but somehow knew through her brother's pain. The walls held faded posters of bands from 15 years ago, a bulletin board still pinned with movie tickets and photos. A soft knock at the door startled her. Alexander stood there, looking uncertain, a strange look on him. I thought you might need more blankets. The heating. Thank you. Their fingers brushed as she took them, sending sparks up her arm. Isabella. He started, then stopped. I'm not good at people. Not anymore. I've noticed, she said gently. But you make me want to try. The words seemed to cost him something. And that terrifies me. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her with more than just extra blankets. He'd given her hope. In the darkness, Isabella touched the worn spines of Charlotte's books, feeling the weight of the past and the possibility of the future pressing in around her. Outside, the storm raged on, but in here, something else was brewing. Something that felt like the beginning of healing. Or perhaps, she thought as she drifted off to sleep, it felt like falling. My dear viewers, if you've been touched by Alexander and Isabella's journey so far, take a moment to share in the comments. Have you ever witnessed someone's walls slowly crumbling? Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who need love the most. Now, let's continue with our story. Dawn broke over a transformed Seattle. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape of fallen trees and flooded streets. Inside Stone Manor, Isabella woke to sunlight filtering through Charlotte's curtains, making the dust motes dance. She found Alexander in his office, looking exhausted but focused. He'd clearly been up all night, coordinating recovery efforts. The road's cleared, he said without looking up. You can head home once James checks the route. The dismissal in his tone was clear. Last night's vulnerability had been locked away again. But something caught Isabella's eye. His desk drawer was slightly open, and she glimpsed the edge of a familiar photo frame. You had it out last night, she said softly. His hands stilled over his keyboard. What? Charlotte's photo. You were looking at it during the storm. Alexander's jaw tightened. You should pack your things. Stop. Isabella's voice was firm. Stop pushing me away because you're afraid of what happened last night. I'm not afraid, Dash. Then why is her photo out? Why did you give me her room? Why are you trying so hard to make me leave when we both know you want me to stay? He stood abruptly, anger flashing in those silver eyes. You don't know what I want. Then tell me, she challenged. Tell me why the great Alexander Stone is so terrified of letting anyone close. Because they die. The words exploded from him. They die, or they leave, or they betray you. My parents died in a car crash when I was 18. I had to drop out of college to take care of Charlotte. I built this company from nothing, working 20-hour days while taking her to chemotherapy. I watched her fade away for 3 years, promising her everything would be okay when we both knew it was a lie. And then dash. He stopped, his breath coming in harsh gasps. And then, Isabella prompted gently. And then I met Claire. His laugh was bitter. I thought I could love again. She said she understood about Charlotte, about why I kept her room exactly as it was. She said she wanted to help me heal. Isabella's heart clenched, knowing what was coming. I found her in here one day, boxing up Charlotte's things. Said it was for my own good, that I needed to move on. She'd already called a donation center. His voice dropped to a whisper. She was selling Charlotte's jewelry on eBay. Oh, Alexander. Isabella moved toward him, but he held up a hand. So yes, Miss Chen, I push people away. Because the alternative is. He gestured helplessly at the room, at himself. Isabella did the only thing she could think of. She opened his desk drawer and took out Charlotte's photo. Tell me about this day, she said, holding it up. Tell me about your sister. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then slowly he sank into his chair. It was her 16th birthday. She'd just finished her first round of chemo, and the doctors said she was responding well. We thought. He swallowed hard. We went to the Space Needle. She wanted to be closer to heaven, she said. Always making jokes, even then. Isabella placed the photo carefully on his desk, where it could be seen. She sounds like she had your strength. She was stronger than me. At the end, she made me promise. His voice cracked. She made me promise not to let her death kill me too. But it did. Part of me died in that hospital room. No, Isabella said firmly. A part of you just went to sleep, like the trees in autumn. But spring always comes, Alexander. Always. He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing straight through to her soul. How do you do that? Do what? See right through every wall I build. Because I know what it's like to build them, she said simply. After Mom died, I thought if I never let anyone close again, I'd never have to feel that pain. But that's not living, it's just existing. Alexander stood and moved to his usual spot by the windows. But this time he held out his hand. Come here, he said softly. Isabella joined him, and he pointed to a small garden visible from their vantage point. Charlotte planted those roses. They die every winter, but they always bloom again in spring. Always. He turned to face her. Stay. What? Stay. Not just as my assistant. Stay and help me remember how to live again. The moment hung between them, fragile as a soap bubble. Then Isabella's phone buzzed. A text from James about the roads being clear. Alexander immediately stiffened, the walls starting to rise again. But Isabella reached out and took his hand. The roads can wait, she said. Tell me more about Charlotte. Tell me about the roses. And there, in the morning light of his office, surrounded by the ghosts of his past and the promise of his future, Alexander Stone began to thaw. The next few weeks brought subtle changes to Stone Manor. Charlotte's photo stayed on Alexander's desk. The curtains in his office, perpetually drawn, began to open more often. And sometimes, in quiet moments, Isabella caught him almost smiling. One evening, as autumn painted Seattle in gold and crimson, Isabella was working late when she heard music drifting from the library. Soft piano notes, hesitant but beautiful. She found Alexander at Charlotte's old piano, his fingers moving over the keys with surprising grace. I didn't know you played, she said softly. He didn't stop, but his shoulders relaxed at her voice. Charlotte and I took lessons together. This was her favorite piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune. Isabella settled into a nearby chair, watching his hands dance across the ivory. You played beautifully. I'm rusty. Haven't touched it since. He trailed off but kept playing. She used to make me play while she did her homework. Said it helped her think. Will you teach me? His hands stilled on the keys. Then, wordlessly, he moved over on the bench. Isabella sat beside him, hyper-aware of their shoulders touching. His hands covered hers, positioning them on the keys. Like this, he murmured, guiding her fingers through a simple melody. His touch was gentle, almost reverent. They played together, making mistakes and starting over, until their simple tune began to sound like music. Isabella was acutely conscious of his warmth beside her, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way his breath caught when their hands tangled. "You're a natural," he said softly. "I have a good teacher." Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. Alexander lifted his hand to brush a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "Isabella." His voice was rough with emotion. "I don't know how to do this anymore." "Do what?" "Feel. Care. Risk." His hand dropped to her shoulder. "Every time I look at you, I see possibilities. And they terrify me." "Good," she whispered. "Being terrified means you're alive." He laughed, a real laugh, rich and warm. "Is that your professional opinion, Miss Chen?" "Actually, it's something Charlotte said in her diary." Alexander froze. "You read her diary?" "It was on her nightstand." I hope that's okay." She was so wise, Alexander. So full of life even when she was dying. Isabella took his hand. "She wrote about you a lot." "What did she say?" His voice was barely audible. "She said you were the strongest person she knew, but that your strength sometimes felt like a cage. She wanted you to be free to love again." Tears glimmered in his eyes. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Kindness isn't about deserving," Isabella said firmly. "It's about healing." Suddenly, Mrs. Sullivan appeared at the door with a tea tray. "I thought you both might need refreshment, and perhaps some of Charlotte's favorite cookies." Alexander stared at the chocolate chip cookies as if seeing a ghost. "You still make them?" "Every week," Mrs. Sullivan smiled. "Been throwing them out mostly. Until recently." She left them alone with the tea and cookies. Alexander picked one up, studying it. "Charlotte used to steal the whole batch," he remembered, smiling. "Hide them under her bed. I'd find crumbs in her sheets during laundry day." "Try one," Isabella encouraged. He took a bite, and 15 years of memories washed over his face. Without warning, he began to cry, silent tears tracking down his cheeks. Isabella didn't speak. She simply held his hand while he remembered how to feel. Finally, he squeezed her fingers. "Thank you." "For what?" "For making me remember the good parts. I've spent so long focusing on the loss, I forgot about the joy." Isabella leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat there in comfortable silence, sharing cookies and memories. "Would you?" Alexander hesitated. "Would you like to see something?" He led her to a room she'd never entered, his private study. Unlike the stark modern office where he worked, this room was warm, personal. Photos covered one wall. Charlotte through the years, their parents, moments of happiness frozen in time. "I come here sometimes," he admitted, "when the mask gets too heavy to wear." Isabella studied the photos, seeing the progression. A happy family, then just Alexander and Charlotte, then Alexander alone. Until now. "May I take your picture?" she asked impulsively, pulling out her phone. He looked startled. "Why?" "Because this wall needs a new chapter. Because you're learning to smile again." Alexander considered for a moment, then nodded. But when Isabella raised her phone, he pulled her close. "Together," he said softly. "If we're starting a new chapter, we'll start it together." The photo captured something rare and precious. Alexander Stone with his guard completely down, looking at Isabella with unguarded tenderness, while she beamed at the camera. "Send that to me," he asked. The next morning, Isabella found the photo framed on his office desk, right next to Charlotte's. And for the first time since she'd known him, Alexander Stone walked into the office without heading straight for the windows. Instead, he stopped at her desk. "Have dinner with me tonight," he said quietly. "Not as my assistant. Just as you." Isabella's heart soared. "Yes." As he walked away, she could have sworn she heard him whistling. The restaurant Alexander chose was intimate and elegant, tucked away in a historic Seattle building. Isabella wore Charlotte's dress again. It felt right somehow, like carrying a piece of blessing with her. Alexander was different outside the office, more relaxed. He told her stories about Charlotte's childhood pranks, about building his company from scratch, about dreams he'd almost forgotten he had. "I want to start a foundation," he admitted over dessert. "In Charlotte's name. Not just for cancer research, but for bringing joy to sick children. Art classes, music therapy." "She'd love that," Isabella smiled, reaching for his hand. The evening was perfect. Too perfect. They should have known the storm was coming. The next morning, Isabella arrived at work to find Claire Morgan waiting in Alexander's office. Sleek, sophisticated, and wearing an engagement ring Isabella recognized from old photos. Charlotte's mother's ring. Alex will be here shortly. Claire smiled, all perfect teeth and cold eyes. We have so much to discuss about the wedding plans. Isabella's world tilted sideways. Wedding plans. Oh, didn't he tell you? We're giving it another try. Sometimes it takes losing something to realize what really matters. Claire's voice dripped honey-coated venom. I'm sure you understand, assistant. Alexander walked in, stopped dead at the sight of them both. Claire. His voice was strangled. What are you doing here? Darling, I've been trying to reach you. When you sent back Mom's ring last month. She held up her hand. I took it as a sign. I didn't send you anything. But doubt flickered in his eyes. Check your sent items, dear. October 15th. Claire's smile was triumphant. You were quite eloquent about wanting to try again. Isabella watched Alexander check his email, saw the blood drain from his face. I never. He looked up devastated. Isabella, I didn't. Your password was Charlotte's birthday, Claire said softly. It always was. I just helped you say what you were too afraid to say. Isabella felt sick. I should go. Isabella, wait dash Alexander started forward, but Claire caught his arm. Let her go, Alex. She was just another assistant. I'm the one who knows the real you. Isabella fled, tears blinding her. Behind her, she heard raised voices, then silence. She worked the rest of the day on autopilot, ignoring Alexander's attempts to speak with her. At 5, she placed her resignation letter on his desk. Effective immediately, she said to his stricken face. Congratulations on your engagement. Isabella, please dash. You don't owe me an explanation, Mr. Stone. I was just your assistant after all. She made it to her apartment before breaking down. Hours later, her phone buzzed with texts from Alexander. She's lying. I didn't send that email. Please let me explain. I fired her from my life once. I'll do it again. Isabella, please. You're not just my assistant. You never were. Finally, a last message that broke her heart. You were right about the walls. But you were wrong about spring coming. Some trees are meant to stay frozen. She turned off her phone. Days passed. Isabella threw herself into job hunting, ignoring the ache in her chest. She avoided news about Stone Enterprises, about the society pages that would surely announce the reconciliation of Seattle's most eligible CEO with his former fiancée. A week later, Mrs. Sullivan appeared at her door. He's destroying himself, the housekeeper said without preamble. Won't eat, won't sleep. Just sits in Charlotte's room playing that piano piece you learned together. He has Claire now, Isabella said bitterly. That woman, Mrs. Sullivan scoffed. He threw her out the minute you left. Called security when she tried to come back. But the damage was done, wasn't it? She knew exactly how to break his trust. And yours. Isabella's heart clenched. Why are you here? Because last night, I found him in his study, staring at your picture together. He said something that broke my heart. Mrs. Sullivan's eyes filled with tears. He said, Charlotte would have loved her, wouldn't she? And I ruined it, just like I ruin everything. Isabella sank onto her couch. What do you want me to do? Come see what he's done to Charlotte's garden. Curious despite herself, Isabella followed Mrs. Sullivan back to Stone Manor. The rose garden was transformed. New benches, fairy lights in the trees, and in the center, a piano. He moved it out here yesterday, Mrs. Sullivan explained. Said if he couldn't have you back, at least he could play where Charlotte's roses could hear him. As if on cue, music drifted through the evening air. Claire de Lune played with heartbreaking perfection. He's been practicing, Mrs. Sullivan said softly. Says he wants to play it right, just once, before he seals the room again. Isabella stood frozen, listening to Alexander pour his grief into the keys. What should I do? She whispered. Mrs. Sullivan squeezed her hand. What Charlotte would do. Help him remember how to live. Isabella stood at the edge of the rose garden, watching Alexander play in the gathering dusk. His shoulders were hunched, his usual perfect posture broken by grief. He hadn't noticed her yet, lost in the music and memories. The piece ended, the final notes hanging in the air like suspended tears. Then his voice, rough with emotion. I miss you, Charlotte. I miss her too. Isabella's heart cracked. She took a step forward, a twig snapping under her foot. Alexander whirled around, his eyes widening. Isabella. The roses, she said softly. They're blooming out of season. He looked at the unexpected November blossoms. Charlotte always said they had a mind of their own. Like their gardener. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, then faded. Why are you here? Because. Isabella took a deep breath. Because some trees aren't meant to stay frozen. Alexander stood, his hands gripping the piano as if for support. I didn't send that email. I would never dash. I know. She moved closer. But that's not why I left. Then why? Because for a moment, I believed her. Not about the email, but about being just another assistant. About not really knowing you. Isabella's voice shook. Because I realized how deeply I'd fallen for you, and it terrified me. Alexander took a step toward her. You were never just an assistant. You were the spring I didn't think I deserved. And you were the winter I wasn't afraid to melt. They stood in Charlotte's garden, the space between them charged with unspoken words. Finally, Alexander spoke. I've made a decision. His voice was quiet but firm. The foundation launches next month. Art classes, music therapy, everything Charlotte would have loved. But I can't do it alone. Alexander dash. Let me finish. Please. He ran a hand through his hair. I've spent 15 years hiding behind walls, using my grief as an excuse not to live. But Charlotte, his voice caught. Charlotte kept trying to teach me, even at the end. He pulled a worn notebook from his pocket. Charlotte's diary. May I? At Isabella's nod, he opened to a marked page and read. Dear Alex, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. But gone doesn't mean lost. It means transformed, like when the roses shed their petals. They're not dying. They're making room for new growth. Please don't shut yourself away. Love again. Live again. I'll be in every sunrise, every song, every moment of joy you let yourself feel. P.S. When you find her, the one who makes you smile again, play her our song. She'll understand. Alexander closed the diary, his hands trembling. I've been playing it wrong all these years. It's not a requiem. It's a love song. He sat at the piano, patting the space beside him. Sit with me? Isabella joined him on the bench, just like that first night. But this time, when Alexander's hands touched the keys, the melody was different. Still Clair de Lune, but lighter, hopeful, a song of spring rather than winter. I can't promise I won't be scared, he said as they played together. I can't promise the walls won't try to rise again, but I can promise to fight them, to choose life, to choose. He looked at her. To choose you if you'll have me. Isabella's fingers found the next notes perfectly, harmonizing with his melody. I'm scared too, but maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared together is braver than being strong alone. Alexander's hands stilled on the keys. Isabella Chen, I love you. Not because you fixed me, but because you showed me I was never really broken. She turned to face him, tears shining in her eyes. And I love you, Alexander Stone. Not despite your winters, but because of the spring hidden within them. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. Stay. Not as my assistant. Not even as my partner in the foundation. Just stay. Be with me. Help me remember how to live. Isabella's answer was to kiss him, soft and sweet and full of promise. Above them, the fairy lights twinkled like stars, and Charlotte's roses released their fragrance into the night air. When they finally parted, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. Move in with me? Into this mausoleum? Isabella teased gently. Only if we can bring it back to life. Open the curtains. Fill it with music. Done. He smiled, a real, full smile that transformed his face. Anything else? Yes. She touched the diary in his pocket. Read me more? Tell me everything about her. Let's make her memory a celebration, not a shrine. Alexander's eyes filled with tears, but they were different now. Healing tears, not grieving ones. She would have loved that. She would have loved you. She already did, Isabella whispered. She led you to me. 1 year later, the Charlotte Stone Center for Creative Healing buzzed with life. Children's artwork lined the corridors, music drifted from therapy rooms, and laughter, the kind that Charlotte would have loved, echoed through the halls. Isabella stood in the doorway of the music room, watching Alexander teach a young girl with a bandana-covered head to play Clair de Lune. Like this, he said gently, guiding her small hands over the keys. Music is magic, you know. It helps us say things when words aren't enough. Is that why you played it for Miss Isabella? The girl asked innocently. Alexander's eyes met Isabella's across the room, filled with love. Yes, Sophie. That's exactly why. Isabella touched the engagement ring on her finger. Not Charlotte's mother's ring, but a new one, chosen together. A fresh start, Alexander had said, while honoring the past. Mr. Stone. Sophie tugged his sleeve. Can you tell us the story again? About your sister and the roses. Actually, Alexander smiled, noticing Isabella. Why don't we both tell it? Isabella joined them at the piano, settling onto the bench that had become their special place. The other children gathered around, some in wheelchairs, others trailing 4 poles, but all with bright, eager eyes. Once, Isabella began, there was a man who built walls around his heart, because he was afraid of losing love again. Alexander continued, his hand finding hers. But what he didn't know was that love is like the roses his sister planted. It blooms even in winter, they finished together. Later that evening, they walked through Charlotte's garden, now the centerpiece of the center's healing spaces. The roses were in full bloom, their fragrance mixing with the summer twilight. She would be proud, Isabella said softly. Not just of the center, but of you. Of how far you've come. Alexander pulled her close. Of us. How far we've come. They reached the piano, still in its place among the roses. Alexander sat, playing the familiar melody that had become their love song. I have something to show you, he said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out Charlotte's diary. I found a page I'd never read before. I was saving it for today. Isabella sat beside him as he opened to the final entry. Dear Alex, and whoever is reading this with him, if you're reading this last page, it means you've finally learned to live again. It means you've found someone who understands that grief and love can exist together, like roses blooming in snow. To the person who helped my brother remember how to smile, thank you. Thank you for seeing past his winters to the spring inside. Thank you for understanding that loving me and loving you are not separate things, but parts of the same heart growing larger. And Alex, the roses will always bloom, the music will always play, and love will always find a way to thaw even the deepest frost. That's the real magic. All my love. Charlotte. P.S. When you have children, and you will, please tell them about their Aunt Charlotte. Tell them she lived, she loved, and she believed in beautiful things. Alexander's voice broke on the last words. Isabella held him close as tears fell. No longer tears of loss, but of gratitude, of love, of life continuing. Actually, Isabella whispered, we can start telling them sooner than you think. Alexander pulled back, his eyes wide. You mean? She nodded, smiling through her own tears. 3 months along. I found out yesterday. His hand trembled as he placed it on her stomach. A baby. Your sister had excellent timing with that diary entry. Alexander laughed. The free, joyous laugh that had once been so rare and was now a daily blessing. He pulled Isabella to her feet, spinning her in the garden they'd brought back to life together. We'll tell them everything, he promised. About Charlotte, about the roses, about how love can heal even the deepest wounds. And about their father, Isabella added, touching his cheek. The man who learned that being strong doesn't mean being frozen. As if in response, a warm breeze rustled through the roses, carrying their perfume like a benediction. Above them, the first star appeared in the twilight sky. Play with me? Alexander asked, sitting back at the piano. Our song for our family. Together, their hands found the keys, and Claire de Lune rose into the evening air. No longer a song of grief, but a lullaby of love, of healing, of spring eternal. In the growing darkness, the roses seemed to glow, their petals catching the last light like promises kept, like love remembered, like life renewed. And somewhere they both knew Charlotte was smiling. The end. My dear viewers, as we close this story, I have one final question. Has love ever helped you heal from loss? Share your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to follow. Remember, like Alexander and Isabella discovered, sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing to live fully again. Choose to live fully today. See you tomorrow. Bye.